You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' peeps? Welcome back to the channel. Zach Lesage here. Word up! Today we're going to be covering over our top 10 decks. Now, I do want to let everyone know that our top 10 decks have become incredibly stagnant in the past few weeks, so I won't be necessarily going into as much depth as I usually do. I'll just be giving it more of like, this is what the deck's doing, this is why it's doing that, etc, etc. So this video might be a little bit shorter for everyone, but it's going to be getting to the point, and I think until we get to Evolving Skies, that's probably going to be the format of this video, and then really kind of going over Evolving Skies a lot more with all of those brand new decks. So we've seen ADP Moltres 100,000 times now. We've seen Eternatus, VMAX, and Darkness Ablaze. These are concepts that a lot of people know. If you don't necessarily know about them, you can get all the lists in the pinned comment below. I've also provided a reference video for every single deck on this list, so you can watch and I'll fully explain everything with gameplay and all that good stuff. If you haven't already, check out the description. You can kind of jump ahead if you want to learn about a specific deck. I do have my timestamps going on in there. Also, you can check out some of my sponsors. You can see that I have that nice little rotating thing there. All of that stuff really helps support the channel. So maybe you're going to pick up some cards from TCG Player, use the Shuffle Squad link. Pick up a playmat, use the Your Playmat link, etc, etc. If you're not really necessarily picking anything up, you can always really support the channel by giving it a like. Subscribing to the channel. We just passed 5,200 subs. We're on our way to 7,500. That's really our next stretch goal, so let's get there. And let me know in the comments below what your favorite deck is in our standard formats. All those things really boost the YouTube algorithm. So that being said, let's jump into our number 10 deck and see exactly what's going on. Jumping into our number 10 spot this week and kind of reappearing back on our list, we got BRONZONG TOOLBOX. Now, BRONZONG TOOLBOX has popped into our bottom half of our top 10 a few times, and I don't necessarily think it's going to really change. Players are really flip-flopping between ADP-zation, variants, and BRONZONG TOOLBOX. Is this the best way to play the deck? I'm going to go with my gut and say no. BRONZONG has not had that big of a appearance. It wins some events, but it usually wins smaller events. And it's really one of those like catch-all calls that you just miss a piece here or there. I mean, it's incredibly powerful when it works, but that's if it works. Is this deck going to make top 10 next week? I honestly couldn't tell you. It's one of those things, if it makes it, it's probably going to be like a 8, 9, 10 spot. So I wouldn't necessarily expect too much of this, but reasonably treat it as kind of like an ADP Moltres, ADP-zation hybrid deck. I think the Aegislash is cool because Decidueye seems to be a little bit on the rise, but right now this deck's placed at number 10, absolutely chilling down there. Probably not going to spike it up too much more. Jumping into our number 9 spot, we got Malamar VMAX, kind of as a Dark Toolbox hybrid. This is a deck that Jonathan Patricio brought to the Chill Series event and was able to place second with it against another Dark Toolbox deck. Now, they seem to be the only player that's really running this deck to that much success, and after watching them play it, I can see where it does have some merit, although I often question myself, why are we not just playing Dark Toolbox? Probably because Malamar VMAX has a different weakness than Dark Toolbox, maybe has a slightly better Rapid Strike URSHIFU matchup, or it has the opportunity to kind of prey on your opponent's hand and steal games out of nowhere. Beyond that, it's kind of like a Dark Toolbox hybrid. Dark is very good because Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX is at the top tables, and this deck is kind of reappearing in our top 10 deck after taking a dip out of it for a few weeks. So really, Jonathan Patricio putting this deck on the map. I think this deck is probably going to either disappear off of this list or stay lower half top 10, so kind of that 7, 8, 9, 10 spots. Very similar to BRONZONG TOOLBOX, so we'll see where it goes, but right now this deck's kind of cool, but I would recommend playing Dark Toolbox more on a personal note. Moving up a spot from number 9 last week to number 8 this week, we got Decidueye INTELEON. Now, I think this deck can kind of hover a spot here or there, and any deck in this list could really hover by a spot here or there. Moving up a spot just tells me that players are probably taking more text out of their deck, less Aegislash, less single prize card attackers, and just basically becoming victim to Decidueye a little bit more often. Decidueye with its Deep Forest camo, really stopping VMAX and GX Pokemon, and INTELEON countering the other single prize card Pokemon or threats that you could have. This deck is capable. I think it's probably going to spike up a little bit more as we approach into Evolving Skies. So if you're a player that does lose to Decidueye, maybe tech Aegislash into your deck, Phoebe, single prize card attackers. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't necessarily worry about this too much, especially if you're playing in a larger event like my late night series or the Chill TCG events on Wednesdays. That being said, Decidueye is a cool deck if you want to just kind of I don't know, it's kind of like playing scratch tickets, right? If you hit the right matchups, you're going to be having a really good day. If you do like playing matchups like that, I'd recommend playing a LUCMETAL before playing this deck. Although in a smaller metagame or a very calculated metagame, Decidueye seems very good. Going forward, I think that this deck is probably going, like I said, it's probably going to be around the 8-9 spots, but it could go up another spot to 7 depending on if people take my advice with the Aegislash and the Phoebes and all that stuff or not. So we'll see how that goes. Staying at number 7 from last week and coming in at number 7 this week, we do have kind of a standard Dark Toolbox deck. Now, this deck is a little bit lower than I expected it, especially after it did win the Chill TCG event. It just seems like it struggles to the decks that it struggles to, like Ice Rider. And when players kind of win a deck like this with Chill, or win a tournament with Chill or something like with a deck like this, players are probably going to counter it. I think this deck is relatively skill-based, especially when it comes to moving energies around and playing things out properly and sequencing. So it's one of those more higher skilled deck, and that's probably why it's number 7. This list is heavily based off of Hayden Fru's deck, so they've been doing seeing a lot of success with it. I have seen a few versions of this deck play the new Sabrina and Bryson card. I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that card. I don't know if it's one of those things where I'm going to add a copy into my list eventually. I think right now I'm not sold on the card, but I do want to test it going in the future, if that makes sense. That being said, I think this deck could go up. I don't think it's necessarily going to go down. So it's either solidified at number 7 or it still has a little bit more wiggle room. I think this deck could eventually push down LUCMETAL or even Eternatus or anything else that's in those lower spots. Not to give any spoilers, but this list is relatively unchanged at this point. So we'll have to see exactly what's going on. We'll see where this deck goes. Maybe the new Sabrina and Bryson. Again, that card is new because it came out in the Crobats Premium Toolbox or Toolkit. So if you haven't already seen that card, totally check it out. Kind of a spiritual reprint of Bellaba and Bryson Man, but completely different. There's a whole backstory. If you got any questions, let me know in the comments. I'll totally answer it. Dropping a spot from number 5 last week to number 6 this week, we do have LUCMETALization. I think this deck is dropping spots because players are finding ways around Zamazenta V. I know my good pal Josh Sutherland is making top 8s and maybe even top 4s with this deck, but isn't really spiking those wins like he used to. That's not a stab at Josh. I think Josh is an incredibly capable and competent LUCMETAL player. The LUCMETAL master, as some players like to call him. It's one of those things where if you just face like a Shadow Rider with a couple paths, it's an auto loss now. If you face an Eternatus with a couple Phoebes or Weavile GX, it's a very bad matchup. This deck has a lot of bad matchups in the format as the metagame has developed, and it's really just a natural thing. So if you're preying on the Rapid Strike URSHIFU decks, that's really where you're going to be able to win. There's really not much fire in the format, although Josh did play against a Baby Blacephalon base deck the other day. It is one of those things where fire is really not popular. There are a few VMAX decks. It's one of those things where, are you going to avoid the Shadow Riders? Are you going to avoid the Eternatuses? Things like that, you're going to have a good day. Otherwise, you're really struggling. And with those two being some of the best decks in formats, this deck does really struggle. I think this deck is probably going to go 5, 6, 7. One of those spots, probably not spiking up too much. But you never know. LUCMETAL has been our number 1 spot before in previous top 10 deck segments. So anything could really happen with this deck. But my gut tells me it's going to be a 5, 6, or 7. Moving up a spot from last week to go from number 6 to number 5, we have ADP MOLTRES. Now, ADP MOLTRES kind of getting defined after seeing the top Players Cup 4 lists. Adding Cobalion into the deck and having access to use Iron Rule GX so you get an extra turn of Dire Flame Wings can really help out against tough matchups like Shadow Rider, Calyrex, VMAX. I know that this deck is partially designed to beat that matchup, but it is really one of those things where you cannot always beat the matchups that your deck is designed to do, and helping them out, especially as they've kind of become immune to what you can offer. So it used to be where you see a Moltres and you're a Shadow Rider player and you probably instantly lose. Now there's a lot of options when it comes to ALCREMIE and refined builds. this build does have a very good matchup against that deck. And there's a few things like Big Charm that can really help this deck round out the metagame. This deck is mainly based off of Logan McKay's list from a couple weeks back, but I do think it's totally super strong. And overall, it's probably just going to stay around the same spots. Similar to LUCMETAL, I think this deck is appropriately placed in the middle of the pack, although this deck could go up a little bit depending on how the metagame eventually turns out. I like this deck a lot. It's cool, kind of like ADP, then you attack with Moltres instead of going with Zacian. I like that it has the built-in energy acceleration, so you save the room for Metal Saucers. So that's why we're not really seeing ADP Zacian. This deck really took the throne from that deck, but it is possible if Ice Rider Calyrex just completely dominates out of nowhere, that deck's weak to metal, we might see ADP Zacian pop up again. But that's how we get into a cyclical metagame. We'll talk about that another time. We're almost at Evolving Skies. I don't think we're necessarily going to get there. It's just me talking my head off. Jumping into our number 4 spot, and it's also at previously number 4 from last week, we got ETERNATUS VMAX. Coming hot off a second place finish at my late night series, Aaron McCann was able to pilot a ETERNATUS VMAX deck to great success, only losing to an Ice Rider deck. Now, ETERNATUS does do pretty well against most of the metagame. Some might ask, is this deck better than Dark Toolbox? I can't necessarily give you an answer. I think it's pretty close. Although ETERNATUS has been around since Darkness Ablaze, consistently is at the top of the metagame, and consistently does very well. Of course, it's going to have a strong Shadow Rider matchup, it's going to have a strong matchup against a lot of decks, and it's relatively easy to play. I think this deck is probably just like a top 5 deck, pretty much always right now, with only Rapid Strike, VMAX keeping it at bay, and Ice Rider, of course, with Path to the Peak really being a difficult matchup to deal with. Really, I think this deck is probably going to be placed number 4, maybe number 5 next week. That's really my hunch based off really our last week of Chilling Reign, or last 2 weeks of Chilling Reign going forward. Our number 3 spot, surprisingly, is at our number 3 spot from last week. We got Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. This deck it's been doing very well overall. I think this is kind of the middle of the road deck. It does well against the metagame. Does it always win? No. Does it do well against most things? Yes. Is it pretty neutral against most things? Yes. This list is a little bit based between my Players' Cup Invitational list mixed with Shintaro Ito's Late Night Series number 1 winning list. Adding the Articuno in there I think is cool, adding some Inteleons in there is cool, but I do like the base of the rest of my deck compared to Shintaro's. I think Shintaro made some questionable decisions when it came to their deck. Although they are the champion, I don't necessarily want to question a world champion. I thought their deck was very interesting, and there's a lot of really cool things that I did like, especially the Articuno in the deck. Articuno allowing you to kind of send up a single prize card Pokemon, attach an energy to one of your VMAXs, be like, yo, boss ain't gonna work. And I think adding 1 in the deck is cool. Maybe I want to add a second after I test it a little bit more. That being said, if you are looking for a great deck that just lives on post-rotation, this is a very good deck to choose. Otherwise, I think Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX, you really can't go wrong with it. You can't necessarily always go right with it unless you're hitting a bunch of dark type decks. Overall, this deck's awesome, so give it a check. Check it out. Jumping into our number 2 spot, we have Rapid Strike URSHIFU VMAX Inteleon. Now, this is the deck that Alex Szymanski was able to win the Players' Cup 4 with, and they were also able to win the Players' Cup Invitational with. There's some cool things in here where I took the basis of Alex Szymanski's winning list for both events, changed it up a little bit based off my style, and also took some inspiration from Natalie Miller, the Players' Cup 1 champion. They played Rapid Strike URSHIFU, Inteleon, Moltres at the Players' Cup Invitational where they were semi-finalists. The Cobalion I think is really cool to give yourself extra turns to use quick shooting or kind of evolve Drizzile into Inteleons. So I thought adding a GX attack to this deck was amazing, really taking that and running with it. I like how this deck plays out overall. Recently played this on the PTCGO Zone stream, and that footage is going to be available on this channel in the near future, so check that out when that comes out. I think this deck's relatively going to stay number 2. Could it jump to number 1? Yeah, quite possibly, but I think Shadow Rider really keeps it at bay, as we saw Sugayashi Yamato as the kind of secret boss champion of the Players' Cup Invitational was able to take down Alex Szymanski. It's a closer matchup than you think, and Alex really showed us how the matchup works, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be easy. I think this deck is probably a safe number 2 going on, but personally I really like how this deck plays out. And here we are at our number 1 spot that was previously at our number 1 spot. We got Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX with ALCREMIE VMAX. This deck has been refined over the course of the Chilling Reign metagame, and I don't necessarily think it's going anywhere. This deck is consistently placing at the absolute top events, doing well all the time, and it really seems only dark decks are stopping it. And with Rapid Strike URSHIFU doing pretty well against most dark type decks, we kind of have a rock, paper, scissors metagame where this is kind of just like the one that usually wins. I'm not entirely sure how rock, paper, scissors works in terms of like playing it to a whole other level, but I'm sure there's one that wins more often than most if you were to use it, or one that more players choose more often. This is really that comparison. So if scissors has a higher win rate than the other two, just out of pure luck, this is really where it's just slightly more inherently powerful, degenerate, toxic, amazing, busted, whichever word you want to use. Shadow Rider really encompasses it all. I think it's going to stay at number 1, unless of course it gets hard countered out of dark decks. However, it's been sitting number 1 and really high up for the past few weeks. I really don't see it jumping down until Evolving Skies comes out, and even then we'll have to see where Shadow Rider is. Honestly, just kind of like best deck and format material right now, and this list has been working absolute wonders. Again, all the lists are in the description below, or the pinned comment below. So check for all the timestamps in the description, check for the pinned comment for all the deck lists. And that's what we got going on for this video today, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed watching all of these top decks. I know a lot of them are similar. I know it's very similar to last week. It is what it is. That's really where our format's at right now. And I mean, it's nice to be playing in a solved format. Like if you're playing Shadow Rider and you're playing it well and you hit the right matchups, you're probably doing really well in the tournament. If you hit a bunch of dark decks, you're probably going to lose. That's how the game works sometimes. There are some luck factors involved, but when it comes to choosing a deck, I really hope that this really helps players pick the right decks for their tournament. That being said, I got a lot of things to edit when it comes to these videos, and it's currently like 3 o'clock in the morning, so I'm totally going to go ahead and edit that to make sure that this gets up timely for everyone. If you haven't already, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and check out the comments below for all the deck lists, but leave me a comment letting me know what your favorite deck is in the standard format. I'll catch up with everyone later. Peace out, and have a great one. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who's become a channel member. It's one of those things where I appreciate every single person who watches my videos, and I mean, that's really where it counts, but for the channel members, they've gone out of their way to financially support me, and I truly appreciate that gesture. It's one of those things when I started channel memberships up on my channel, and I just didn't know if anyone was ever going to do it, so I truly appreciate everyone taking the plunge, taking a leap of trust, and investing in me as a content creator. Truly makes a difference for me each and every month. If you haven't already thought about becoming a channel member, you might want to contribute to the channel, and I do put everything back into the channel to make it the best possible place to watch for Pokemon TCG content. Again, I truly appreciate everyone. Thank you so much. Cheers. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.